Welcome to the Train Like a King podcast, dedicated to all things paddling, designed to help paddlers of all levels get motivated to get out on the water. Tune in, grab your paddle, and let's train like a king. So let's talk about the early days. How did I get into wakaama or outrigger canoeing, and how did I end up where I am now? So I was first introduced to paddling by my father, along with my three sisters and my mother. We all kind of started at different times, but ultimately we all ended up paddling, becoming a wakaama family. And I started at the age of 7. 7 years old is the first time that I picked up a paddle and started paddling and joining my sisters. I watched my sisters paddle for a few years prior to that. We are from the far north, Taitokero, in a place called Broadwood, and we used to train in a place called Pawarenga. My club at the time and my club to this day is Ngā Hoi Horo, which means fast paddlers or fast paddles. And yeah, we first started training on a tidal harbour, so you had to time it right, otherwise you'll be walking the canoes back in knee-deep mud, because when the tide goes out, it just exposes all of this mud. So not the easiest place to train, but it was a really important part of the development of Ngā Hoi Horo. A lot of top paddlers have come from Ngā Hoi Horo, and it was one of the earliest clubs, especially in the far north. One of the earliest clubs to start in New Zealand. So looking back now, there's so many clubs in New Zealand, and it's awesome to see the growth that's occurred. So started paddling in Pawarenga, and then later on we moved. Part of the club started training closer to town in Kaitaia, or at a lake called Lake Ngātu. And in the early days, wakaama was just a summer sport for us. In the winter time, I played rugby. Even prior to that, we played tennis and all these other different sports. So wakaama, we only kind of started training towards the end of the year, say November, December maybe. Training for our national sprint championships, which happen in January each year. Whereas the rest of the year, I wouldn't really pick up a paddle. I would be playing rugby and, focusing on school and those type of things. So those were the early days. And like I said, I grew up watching my two older sisters paddle first, because they were the first ones to paddle out of all of us. And it was really awesome because they kind of set the path for me and my twin sister, and my mother, who started after them. Thanks to my father coaching them, they represented New Zealand at the World Championships, both, world champions in their own right. And yeah, it was just awesome to see. Even Rose, one of my older sisters, even represented in Tahiti. Did her first TI tour in, I want to say 2009. So that was 4 years before I even got to TI tour. What else can I say about the early days? Went to Kaitaia College in the far north, like a small town. Broadwood's even smaller. So we my mother was the teacher, so we kind of went from teacher house to teacher house to teacher house. Probably had 4 different houses within Kaitaia during those, primary school and high school years. I actually started off school at Broadwood Area School, and I actually started in an all Māori speaking classroom. So I learned to speak te reo Māori at a young age. My class was called Te Puna, and we only spoke Māori, and we learnt in Māori and everything. And then next to us, we had at the same school, we had Endeavour, which was the Pākehā classroom, which I think to this day, I think was always an interesting concept for a school to have 2 classrooms next to each other, same age kids. One was fully te reo Māori immersive, and then one was English Pākehā speaking. So yeah, that was a very I think important part of my life, was being able to learn te reo Māori, learn my roots. On my mother's side, Tainui is my iwi, so that's more of the Waikato region. And then on my father's side, Ngāpuhi is my iwi, so the north. So a bit of a mix of the north and the Waikato region. So yeah, the way that I actually started paddling, I was up at Lake Ngātu watching my sisters train, and a coach, Ron, she was one of my earliest coaches, and she told me to stand in the water knee deep and gave me a paddle and just told me, take a few strokes. And I did, and that was the beginning. And Ron, she was a huge, and to this day, a huge part of the success at Ngā Hoi Horo, and she contributed so much to us, to the sport, to young paddlers, particularly in those outer regions like Broadwood, Pawarenga, Pangaru, picking kids up, every afternoon that they could, and driving them hours to training. Well, that's one of the hardest jobs in Wakaama, is coaching. It's easier to coach a team that's already good, and with paddlers who are already keen and have the luxury of getting to training and that. But what makes a true coach is finding those paddlers, those kids that can't always make it to training easily, and providing them the support to get to training. And that was big ups to Ron, to Bruce, Kinsey, and the likes. And those were the early days. Let me check my notes. Yeah, so basically finished up at Kaitaia College in the year 2011, and that was marked my last secondary schools championships. Well, first and last. And